Welcome back, everybody, to Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And in this episode, we interview Leigh-Anne LoPinto.
Yeah, this interview is actually quite a raw interview, I would say, in terms of some of the things that we share. But I've done a little bit of work with Leigh-Anne and just, it's such amazing work that she's doing and putting into the world and really helping people to reclaim their relationships and coming into, I think the term conscious relationships gets thrown around a little bit and people take the piss out of it a little bit. But at the core of that, it's really just about being more present and, coming into who you are. And again, this is what our show is all about, is coming back to the way we were designed to live, the way we were designed to relate to others, the way we were designed to be in romantic relationships. So, so we cover quite a lot of topics. I honestly think that we could have spoken to Leigh-Anne for hours. Like, it could have easily been a 3-hour episode. And there's lots more that we want to cover with her. So we're definitely going to get her on again at some stage.
Definitely have to have another part 2 and maybe 3. I'm sure she'll be a returning guest and maybe even at a round table in the future. Would be great.
100%. So I just want to let everyone know, I just watched this episode back yesterday because we did record it about a month or so ago. I look miserable in this episode. I don't know why. I don't know what was going on for me that day. I just look very serious and I promise I loved this interview. Like, I enjoyed it so much. I loved the conversation, but my face was just like super serious. So just disregard that, please. Yeah. And we even got, you might hear in the background, we got some kookaburras singing in the background a couple of times during the interview. At one point, you said a word. I can't remember what it was now, but I was like, oh, did he just like trigger the kookaburras into singing? You said this, it was like a code word. So yeah, you might hear a bit of that background noise.
I do have a special relationship with birds. But yeah, there's lots of wildlife out our back door right here. Sometimes you'll hear that in any of these episodes, all kinds of birds. And
this one in particular,
that's just the way we roll.
Yeah, this one in particular, I don't know what was going on that day, but the kookaburras were going off. We actually had a branch fall and hit the roof in the middle of the episode. I think you see me kind of look up because it was really loud. It doesn't sound that you'll hear it in the audio, but it was really loud for us. And then we also got like leaves or something blowing on the roof. It kind of sounds a bit like rain, but you can hear that too. But this is being Natural AF, guys. We literally live like pretty much in the middle of the bush. So
yeah, if you've ever seen the movie Fern Gully, no joke, we literally live there. We live in Fern Gully.
Kinda.
And may even allegedly have fairies or pixies or something living in a tree nearby.
Definitely fairies on this property.
As always, we appreciate everyone that supported the episodes so far and listened to them and shared them. Please continue to do so. It really helps us out, and it helps you get the most out of it as well. The more, these topics, I think some of them are so critically important for your mental health, spiritual health, and all that. The more people around you are talking about it, the more you'll integrate these lessons and live them out in your lives. And our products as well. We appreciate everyone that's bought from Natural Art Form. And it's just a small family-owned business. We make the products ourselves. And we have an operation going in the United States with my daughter. She's grown up and helping us with our business. Mm-hmm. And we also sell our product here in Australia. So check out naturalartform.com. Our product is a different take on a pain relief cream. Down here, they call it deep heat and Danka rub or something.
Danka rub.
Danka rub, mate. Yeah, agree with the Danka rub. It smells dank. Nah, this doesn't smell like dank. This smells like lemongrass, cedar wood, not the menthol that a lot of people associate pain bombs with. And it incorporates organic herbal oils, arnica, comfrey, calendula, St. John's wort with DMSO and magnesium. If you want to know more about DMSO, that's on our Instagram and our website. You can learn all about it, how it works. You can check out the book from Amanda Vollmer. And if you're in the alternative health space, I'm sure you've probably come across it before. And it's just something that's really helped me to heal my own shoulder, till my body heals itself. But the product I made allowed me to stop hurting long enough to where it actually would heal on the go. And I still use it today. I'm going to use it right after this because I've been in the gym doing some crazy intense workouts, and it works really, really well for muscle repair, workout recovery, and all that. So go check it out, naturalartform.com.
In Australia too, we have extended our product range out to deodorant and a beautiful repair skin cream.
Yes.
We initially called it a sunburn recovery lotion, but it's so much more than that. So for any kind of skin conditions, I've actually had some dermatitis on my thumb flare up over the last week or so. I've been using it day in and day out, and I've actually never used anything like that on active dermatitis that actually absorbs into the skin, because it does get very, very dry, and quite often whatever you put on just like comes right off. So highly recommend that. Check them out. And we do have big plans for 2025 to get those products out to the States as well. So stay tuned for that. Head to Natural Art Form, and you can also follow us on socials at Natural Art Form. All the links are in our link tree. And without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Let's go.
Leigh-Anne LoPinto is a Los Angeles-based psychologist, relationship coach, and breathwork teacher with over 12 years of experience. She has worked with thousands of people all over the world to heal relationship wounds, develop healthy self-love, and attract incredible relationships. She specializes in conscious relationships and spiritual partnership, using relationships to evolve on a soul level. Welcome, Leigh-Anne.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to talk to both of you today.
Oh, us too. I obviously have done some work with you, and in just half an hour with you, I had such profound shifts afterwards, and I just had to get you on to talk about this work that you do because it's so amazing.
I'm so happy. It's just, yeah, it just blew my mind when you sent me the follow-up email, and I'm just so happy for you. Yeah, for both of you.
Thank you.
Anyone listening, by the way, can book a free 30-minute call with me. We can get into that later, but
Yeah, awesome.
To get into anything around that work.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we'd like to kick it off first by just giving you the floor to share a little bit about yourself and your own journey and what kind of led you to this work and where you are today.
Wow. I mean, my story is, how do I condense it into something that is short? I don't want to give my life story, but my work definitely was born out of the fire. About 10 years ago, actually, was when my marriage crashed and burned, and he and I were together for almost 20 years. And we have a child together. And so back in 2014, everything just completely crumbled with he and I. And I met him when I was 18, and we just fell into things. And like so many people with relationships, you just meet people and you just kind of think it's all going to work out and you just wish for the best. And what I had to learn the hard way was that that wasn't the way. And so we were young, we were immature. Our relationship was based on a foundation of partying and, all of that. And so what I had to learn the hard way was that number one, we weren't meant to be together forever, and that's okay. I had to learn that the ending of relationship doesn't necessarily mean failure or that one or the other person is a bad person. That was actually a big lesson for me to learn. I also had to learn all about how all of our relationship patterns can be traced back to childhood, right? So our relationship with our mother and our father is really, really important. This is why a lot of psychologists, the first thing that they will ask you is about the relationship with your parents. And it's for a reason, because pretty much all of our relationship patterns come from that place, from childhood. And our mother and our father kind of give us the template for not only what our relationship looks like and how it should be done, but also the templating of a woman's role, a man's role, the masculine, the feminine, all of that. And so shadow work is really the name of the game here. 10 years ago, I was thrown into all of the shadow work, which I didn't even know that that's what you called it. But the good thing, that was my greatest blessing. I didn't know it at the time, but it basically just opened what felt like a can of worms. All of my stuff came up, all of his stuff came up, but it gave us a chance to actually look at ourselves with clear eyes, to be able to take responsibility for our relationship patterns so that we didn't keep repeating them. So that's where all my work was born from. And yeah, it was not a comfortable time for me, but I knew after I came up and out of that I had to start specializing in relationships. I was practicing as a psychologist at the time, helping everybody with everything, but I knew I had to specialize specifically in relationships after that. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's such a unfortunately common story, and I think a lot of our listeners will identify with that. Have gone through similar things. I know I definitely have. Not from such, well, I would say such heights, because to me, I look at somebody that's been married for 20 some years, it's quite an accomplishment. I have a friend that just celebrated their 15th, I think, and I'm just like, that's where I want to get to, someday. And then to work that hard, because I know how much work it takes in the beginning, and I can only imagine throughout a longer relationship how much work goes into it. So when it broke apart for you, how did you end up not just coping, but how did you end up coming out of it like a victor? And what was some of that rebuilding process like?
I love that question. I love the word victor. I mean, I definitely like in the 2 year period, which was the darkness, like it was literally the worst thing that had ever happened to me. It was really, really intense. But yeah, I mean, I think what helped me to come up and out was we did during that 2 year period, we went to couples therapy every single week. We also had our own individual therapy every single week. So it was really, really intensive. All of our stuff was coming up. So we were working through all of our stuff in addition to getting through a crisis, which basically is what it felt like. But eventually I was able to, with the help of my therapist, especially after the first year, which was really like crisis mode, but then we shifted into, I mean, it was a little bit more manageable after that. It was really like, okay, we had moved through quite a lot of stuff. It's almost like as a couple, we didn't have any big issues with each other, but we were just trying to get the love back, like the spark back in our relationship. And unfortunately, we just weren't able to do that. But the second year of working with my therapist, I remember she really helped me to see that I wasn't a victim, which kind of ties into what you're saying about the victor. She taught me about growth mentality and how I can either look at this as a complete failure and I'm horrible and, I made a big mistake, or you can basically see what are the learning lessons here? How can I grow and evolve from this? So that was a real huge game changer. She also told me and us that relationships are really a co-creation of two people coming together and shaping the thing, which was really good for me to understand because up until that point, I had been doing a lot of finger pointing at him in terms of you're doing all this stuff that's not feeling good to me and you're being disrespectful. And it's not like those things weren't true, but I had to own my side of the street, which is like, I didn't have very good boundaries. I was putting up with a lot of stuff. I had very low standards. I was always like the cool girl back then who was like, yeah, I don't really need very much, And so I was co-creating the dynamic with him. And so those were the things that were actually really empowering for me because once I turned towards myself and took responsibility, then I had something to work with in terms of my own healing. And that changed everything.
Yeah, Isaac and I can both relate to that. I know we had like very different relationship histories. However, we both had a lot of the same patterns of behavior. So we both of us had sort of three major relationships before we met each other. And we kind of experienced the same thing where it was like lots of codependency, quite toxic in a lot of ways. Probably lack of boundaries for sure.
Yeah, anxiously attached. That side,
yeah. And then it was interesting because when we were getting to know each other and like talking about this stuff, we kind of went through the same experience also where in my case it was after it was while I was actually alone that I started to do a lot of inner work and looked back and realized that I kind of did the same thing. Like I was always pointing the finger of blame. It was always their fault for how they were making me feel. And I started to actually see the things that I was doing that were contributing to, like you said, that dynamic and how I was feeling. And in Isaac's case, it was in his last relationship that he started to realize that in the relationship as it was kind of breaking down. So it's really interesting to see because, I mean, I work with a modality called Psych K, and it's all about rewriting subconscious beliefs. And I've had some amazing transformations through that. And that's the biggest thing, is that you attract what you are, not what you want. And I think that's so common in relationships.
Totally. Oh, I love that so much. I remember when I had that breakthrough of what you just said. I was like, oh my God, we don't actually attract what we want. We attract like what's basically in our subconscious that's pulling
Yeah.
everything we
Yeah.
haven't. I was like, ah, but I mean, once you, it's a hard pill to swallow, right? But like once you do, you're like, okay, here's the material I actually can work with in order to improve my life, my relationships. And I feel like that's the first step of just like being able to sort of zoom out from yourself and see like with clear eyes, like what are my patterns? What's going on? Like that's huge. That's half the battle. And
Mm.
then you just start to get to work. And I always tell people like every small step forward counts from there. Once you know, it's like, okay, just take one day at a time, small steps forward. And it all makes a difference because as you do your inner work, you will see your exterior change, your relationships change as you do it. And so, best case scenario, whether it's romantic relationships or even just friendships, right? Any relationship, you can see kind of this upward trajectory or the health overall improving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I actually wanted to ask you too, because we haven't talked about this before, but I know you talked about you did obviously did lots of therapy during that, and you are a psychologist, but now you also practice breath work. So can you talk a little about the balance between sort of dealing with things from a more cognitive perspective and then dealing with them sort of more through the body and your experience with that?
I love that question too, because yeah, breathwork was the missing piece for me. Once I discovered breathwork personally, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing that really was like made the biggest difference. And so I don't discount the years of therapy that really, really helped me. And I know there's a lot of feelings about therapy these days, and that's okay, like for good reason, right? Like there's a lot of therapists out there that aren't great, to be honest with you. And so, but the combination of working with a really good therapist, you get on the mental and the emotional level, right? That those are the levels you work at. With breath work, I feel like for me, it makes it more holistic because then all of a sudden you're working somatically with stuck trauma in the body. You're also working spiritually and energetically as well, because it just opens you up, right, to the divine. I mean, it's my bridge to God. I should probably share the type of breath work I do with people. There's so many
Absolutely.
different types today. But I do a style where it's done laying down for about 30 to 40 minutes. And it's done all through the mouth. And it's a three-part breath where you do one into the belly, one into the breath, and then out. So it's like, and so you do that for 30, 40 minutes, and it really gets you into an altered state, which it feels so different than plant medicine. And actually, for me, it feels very clean because it's your own energy,
Yeah.
your own breath. But it gets you into an altered state. And then all of a sudden, so many different things can happen, right? Like like I said, stuck emotions or trauma in the body have a chance to come up and out. Like you can feel somatically like this stuff moving, stuck emotions, you can have emotional releases and all of that. And then energetically, it's almost like taking a shower. I call it energetic hygiene. It just really cleanses and clears so much from you. And so for me, breath work was definitely the thing that changed the game for me, especially with sexual trauma, which I had from childhood. Therapy really, really helped with that, but it wasn't until I discovered breath work that it really helped me energetically clear that stuff, which was so important. And so now I do combine therapy and breath work with clients. And yeah, I feel like it does work holistically. There's other
Wow.
ways to do it, but that's just my personal preference with breath work.
Absolutely love this topic, as Alexa knows. I had my first experience with that similar type of breath work, but it was through the nose, but it was like a prolonged, you know, thing. But I don't know if you know Eric Casano. Are you familiar with him out there in LA?
Oh, I don't think so, actually. I would love
Okay.
to
Well,
get them using.
yeah, I met him at Music and Sky Festival. I went out there to work with Yerasimos, and I believe you were just on their podcast, or
Yeah,
at least,
they're
yeah.
great.
Yeah, so good. And that really opened me up to just everything that you just said. And I have like a tinkerer's mind a little bit. So as I'm doing the breath work on my own, I'm just like experiencing and exploring what's happening. And I don't know enough about it to tell people like really what's going on. I have some ideas, but when it comes to moving these emotions or these stuck emotions, is this something, because I had a men's group this weekend where I talked about this, and I just kind of briefly mentioned the breath work, and we didn't really go into it because there was a couple guys there that had some significant trauma from the military, and I have a military background, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it's safe for that, but I'm not a professional in it. So for somebody that has like violent military trauma and stuff like that, is breathwork something that can gently and easily work with stuff like that and move those safely?
Yeah, what a good question that is. I love everything that you just said because I do think that it is important to understand a little bit about the person that, if you're a breathwork teacher or facilitator, understand the level of trauma they have. What I love about this style of breathwork is I feel like it's so different from plant medicine in terms of you're in the driver's seat and you're in control. And so like
Mm,
if someone does have a significant amount of trauma and they start to breathe, I always remind people at the beginning that you can stop at any time. If it gets too intense, you can literally just stop the breath and just return to normal breathing and you'll come back. And so I don't I've never done breath work with someone where they haven't felt like that, like they're in control. And that's really important
mm,
to me in terms of just them feeling sovereign. And so I do feel like it's a good way to sort of test the waters out a little bit. And if it's too intense, you can just come back, right? And just like sort of dip your toe in a little bit. I think
mm,
it would be great for veterans. But
absolutely.
then, everyone has to just gauge like what their edge is, right? And so, but I love it because it's not like plant medicine where you sort of like you're in, like you're committed, right? You can't
Right.
you just turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have experienced Isaac doing breath work, and he's told me about some of like he gets the hand tightening and all this stuff, and it has kind of freaked me out if I'm honest, because I'm like, I don't like that, because and I think to me it's like I feel like like I would be out of control if my hands are doing this thing, and it's like, and that was like doing really intense like holotropic breath work, I think, where you
Yeah, it
got
was
that.
probably a bit more intense than
Yeah, and
other forms,
then
but
he's done it once where I kind of walked in and I was like, "What's going on over there?" He was like breathing really heavily and all this stuff was happening. And he came up and he was like, "That was amazing." And I was like, "That was freaking me out just watching you do that." Like, but what I loved about the breath work that you sent me was yeah, it's quite gentle. And in saying that, I do Kundalini yoga. I've been practicing that for about a year and a half now, or maybe almost 2 years. And I love that because my teacher, who's a good friend of ours, she actually kind of does her own thing. So I've been to her teacher's class, and her teacher's like really intense. She does everything at full time. Some things are like 11 minutes sitting in this really intense breathing. Hers is a bit more yin, and which I love. So I have a little bit of experience, but with more gentler types. But that's what I loved about the breath work that you sent me, was that it was just really easy. And I felt really in control and I could stop at any time, but I didn't need to. And it was interesting. I didn't get like the hand tightening. I just felt lots of energy in my hand, lots of like heat and tingling. It was
yeah.
really awesome.
I love that. Yeah, the breath work that I do, I don't know if I can't remember if I said in the intro to that, the heart opening breath work. Is that the one that you're talking about? The heart.
Yeah.
Okay. And people can also just reach out if they want that one. It's just an audio recording.
Okay.
But I can't remember if in the intro I tell people about like different ways that you can slow it down, right? Because you can also switch from the mouth breathing to nose. That's a way to sort of reduce the intensity. You can also play with the speed, and so you can slow it down. You can take breaks. There's lots of different ways that you can sort of take your foot off the gas pedal if it's starting to get really intense. So I just like to empower people with all those different things. Vice versa, if you want it to be more intense, and if people do it and they're like, I'm not really feeling too much, right? You can also take like deeper breaths or faster breaths, or just push yourself a little bit and play with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic. And I love the like the brainstorming aspect of it, or if I have a problem that I'm struggling with. And it could be something in business, because that's been a big focus of mine since moving across the world and starting up here. Or I imagine you could use it for any problem, but I always feel like afterwards I need to keep a notepad, provided that I can actually use my fingers and write in it, or a voice note, because I feel like whatever's happening, maybe you can describe this, like what's actually happening, but I feel like it's opening me up to a lot of positivity, really, really abundance, like a lot of ideas. I kind of joke like it's taking like cocaine or something where you're just talking business ideas. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. So you're a bit on this high, but some of the ideas that came to me, this podcast, starting this podcast and the need to do it and how it aligns with my astrology, it aligns with my human design and also the stuff. It was like using the breath, I had this epiphany that led me to something that lights me up, and then something that helped Alexa and I get to know each other and opened me up to so many beautiful things in my life. So what is happening? Are we tapping into God? Is that our higher self? Is it, little green aliens? Like, what's up?
I love this. You described it so well. This is exactly it. I mean, this is why I call it my bridge to God, but you can say the higher self or the universe, right? For me, like every time I start to breathe, it brings me back home to the truth of who I am. And so it's kind of like clearing the debris and just like the fog sometimes that we're in that disconnects us from who we truly are. That's kind of the way I see it. And so breath work, it just kind of opens that channel. A lot of people talk about like, opening the channel, keeping the channel clean and clear so you can hear intuitive guidance. And so this is what breath work does. It's one of my favorite things, is what you just said, to come to breath work with an intention, to get clarity in a certain area in a relationship, with business stuff. I also get so many things come through for business. I mean, my whole mentorship, which is like the pinnacle of the work that I've created, came through during breath work, and exactly the structure and everything. And so when those ideas come through, I always honor them by, sitting with them and trying to push them forward if I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the idea of sitting like with a pen and paper, or a lot of times during breath work, there's so much intensity in my body that I don't think I can write for a few minutes, but I usually leave
Right.
myself like a note sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I've noticed too is because it is an energy, and I did a small talk this weekend with a group of men at this camp out gathering thing, and it was called Dances with Fire, and this idea of being around the fire, and I started talking about energy and electricity, and it's woven throughout this whole topic. But when I can't move my hands, if sometimes I'll have a fire and I'll just kind of get the fire going, and I'll do breath work with the elements. That was something that Eric Casano taught me about. And I'll sit next to the fire, and then if the energy gets really, really intense, I'll just not dangerously, but I'll kind of put my hand near the fire, and it just like releases it. It's like the energy just burns off. It's fascinating.
That's so cool. Oh, that's so cool. So my teacher is David Elliott, who's kind of like an OG here in LA. He's in his 60s now,
Oh,
but
nice.
he's got so many different breathwork teachers all over the world. But he also works with the elements too. He has a
Cool.
ton of free breathwork audios on Spotify. I still use them all the time, but a lot of those do incorporate the elements as well. Yeah, earth, fire, air, water.
Love it. It's so good.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so good.
So good.
So just sort of, because there's so many threads that we can pull talking to you, so I'm like, we kind of got to limit it to just a few topics because we could just talk for hours and hours and hours. But I did just want to touch on, because you mentioned that you experienced sexual trauma as in your childhood. I have friends that have, I have family members that have. It's quite prevalent, and I think, especially with my family members, I mean, I think it was also going back 20, 30 years. The difference is that no one talked about it back then. And I think that it's also, the way that we're conditioned. I think there's we see it's very normal now to see lots of like sexual imagery and like music videos and movies. And I think that for children exposed to that at a young age, that can even be traumatizing, even if it's not, sexual abuse as such. So I guess I just wanted to maybe just get you to talk a little about, I don't know, some of the ways that it presents, because I know that for lots of, for women especially that have experienced sexual abuse or sexual trauma in childhood, it's often very common that they become quite promiscuous and all these things that sort of happen. And I experienced that not as a result of sexual trauma, as far as I know, but I experienced that too, but for me, it was sort of more about the conditioning. So that I received growing up, because I was very much of the generation of like female empowerment and girl power. I was like right into the Spice Girls and all this stuff. And like years later, I realized like I was very much conditioned to be like, yeah, women can do whatever we want. We can sleep around. It's fine and whatever. And like those years for me were really actually not nice years at all for many reasons. So yeah, if you just want to talk a little more on that, and then maybe we can get into some of the ways that are really beneficial to heal from, because obviously we've touched on sort of the therapy and the breath work, but then sort of more directly related to sexual trauma.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to talk about here. I love this question. And so I wrote an article on Substack called Toward Sexual Sovereignty, which I'll kind of reference because it's basically encapsulates a lot of my views on this. And so starting with sexual trauma. So especially in childhood, but I guess you can say at any point if sexual abuse or trauma occurs, what happens from an energetic, I mean, obviously there's psychological damage, right? Obviously. And, physical abuse damage as well, if that's included. But from an energetic perspective, the sexual abuse energy is like a dark predator kind of energy. And so what happens is it actually sort of like infects the person, the victim of the abuse, because the perpetrator is carrying that energy that kind of hijacks them, makes them do all sorts of stuff. It's not actually truly them at a soul level, but it hijacks the brains. You can even see this with pornography, right? Pornography hijacks and infects the brains of the people that watch it, and it distorts their preferences to make them preferences that aren't even really naturally their own. And so it's the same kind of energy. It really boils down to the same kind of dark predator energy that seeks to feed off of our energy, especially sexual energy, because sexual energy is very powerful and very, very potent. So I hope I'm not going into like woo-woo stuff here, but there's just kind of a truth to it. And so unfortunately, the victim kind of gets that energy stuck in their energy field, and it sort of tags them as a victim. It also makes them do things like promiscuity and other things that, again, aren't really naturally who they are, but it influences them behind the scenes. And so that was definitely part of my experience when I was younger as well. And then, yes, like you said, you also have all the stuff from music, movies, all the media that's influencing women. I was just in the gym the other day. I was listening to like 90s hip hop music. I don't remember the name of it was like Salt and Pepper or something. And it was like the lyrics are so bad that are training women, right, to just like not give a shit about relationships and just to go out and have sex. It's just crazy. And then of course it's gotten worse too over time. I don't really listen to popular music right now because it's all garbage. But yeah, you've seen this, like the pendulum swing, right? From women who, that was much more private and hidden to now it's just completely hypersexual all over the place. And so I am not a fan of this because I don't think that this is empowerment at all, right? I don't think it's empowerment that's not true freedom for me. But a lot of us have to learn the hard way through sort of trying it out. And that's learning like that's not fulfilling. That's really not what true freedom is. I'm hoping, knock on wood, that the whole open relationship sort of polyamory stuff, I'm hoping it's dying down. I don't really know, but we'll see. But all these things are linked together. That's why I'm bringing them up right now. And so anyway, if you have sexual abuse or trauma, you really have to not only heal on a psychological level, but also energetically as well to get that out of your field. And so I can send you the breathworks that I used from my teacher, David. He also speaks about this particular predator energy very extensively in his second book. That's you can buy it. It's also free as a PDF. There's a chapter in there on this energy that really, really helped me as well. But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. Are there more questions specifically you want me to talk about?
I just have one question because I think it's a common misconception to some people, and I'm not even 100% sure. But so I've got a friend that she's got vague memories. Like she's often said, I'm pretty sure there's some sexual trauma in my childhood or in my history, but I don't think she has very clear memories. Obviously, you know, when you're dissociating and things like that as a protective mechanism, it's very common to not remember the event. Is it necessary to remember what happened to heal from it if it did happen?
That's a really good question. I would say I don't know if it's necessary. I mean, it certainly can help if you want to sort of, it's almost like, you know, people say you can't really bypass things, you have to go through the thing, right? And so I would say that your intuition and your body a lot of times it will show you the things when you're ready, right? And so you kind of just have to trust the process there. I would say for her, you know, or people who have this, because I have heard that a lot as well, you know, people, they're not really sure. I would say, you know, do things like breath work, do things like shadow work. And as you start to peel the layers off, you know, psychically, you might get to some things, right? After you do that work, or maybe not, right? Or maybe you'll just get clear. Either way, people honestly that can just do the best that they can. I don't know if it's 100% necessary, but I do tend to just trust the process and the unfolding.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had that experience where I started doing the inner work about 2 years ago, like really deep stuff. And I've literally had memories come back that I had a very vague memory of. And then I've literally had them come back and I'm like, okay, I think it's time to heal this now. So yeah, absolutely. I think trusting your body, trusting your mind, I think it always knows what's best for you and when the right time for those things to come up is.
Yeah. I have one more thing actually. Now that I was hearing your response, I was like, oh yeah, there's that thing that you can do too, which is called recapitulation. Are you too familiar? Have you heard of that
Just
term?
No.
recently, I've it's come up on a couple of videos, but go into it, please.
Okay, so recapitulation is something I learned from Joel Schafer. I had him on my podcast. He's a student of the shamanic traditions. He doesn't call himself a shaman, but he kind of really is. But anyway, recapitulation is a method where it's a very easy breathing technique. I'll just demonstrate it in a second, where basically what you do is you just close your eyes, you bring to mind a memory, typically a memory that it might be a little traumatic, a situation maybe where you lost your power. And you basically just use your inhales to pull your essence and your energy back. If we think about people or relationships or situations where we lost our power, there was like energy leaks there. That's a loss of your essence and your sort of basically it's like a mini soul retrieval if people are familiar with this. So you can basically just pull your energy back and then on the exhale you just send whatever energy you might have picked up that's not yours. And so it basically just looks like this. You bring to mind the memory and then you just it's just very, very simple. So in your mind, you're just sticking with that memory and you're just calling back your power and your essence. And so you can do it for as little as 5 minutes. You can also I've done it up to 90 minutes. And it's incredible the changes that I've witnessed. So it's literally kind of just taking responsibility to pull that soul essence back to you. So the reason I mentioned that for the context of what we're talking about is that Joel was sharing that as you are able to do work to go back to different memories, a lot of times your memory, once you start calling back your power and your energy, and you do this for a little while, your memory actually will get sharper and sharper. You'll be able to remember things that maybe you forgot.
Isaac needs to do that on the daily. He's always forgetting things.
Yeah,
I love that.
I'm just moving through
It's
my.
really good.
I'm a sacral man, Jen. So I'm just out there like gut responding everything. I don't got time for this.
I
Do you know,
love this.
do you know about human design, Leanne?
A little bit, a little bit.
Yeah, we're right into human design. So yeah, it's awesome to help you to get to know yourself. And speaking of conscious relationships, it's I highly recommend people learn their human design if they're like starting a new relationship, or even just like before getting into a relationship, because you kind of can learn a lot of really like just really practical ways, like about just like learning about how you sort of operate best, and like obviously whatever resonates for you. It's called the human design experiment, so it's not meant to be approached with dogma, but And then just getting to know, we got to know each other on such a deep level, and human design had a really big part in that. So we love human
Oh,
design.
that's so incredible. Is anyone out there doing like relationship work using human design?
I think didn't you have a reading?
Yeah, there's people that'll do readings and they can focus on the relationship aspects of it. I think a fairly competent human design practitioner or whatever
I love that.
will be able to read into it.
Yeah.
That and astrology too, because I went through a similar. It was much contracted, but it was my previous relationship. We did a lot of this like similar thing. We're both committed to finding out what the problem is. I think she was a little more committed to finding out why I was the problem, but it was like one marital counselor after another. But we met this one. She found a lot of it. She introduced me to human design. She researched all these different things. She's an astrologer, so she went into that. But we had a marital counselor that did astrology, and it was like months. You know, you could take months to try to get to know people and know what the actual dynamics are versus what they're showing you. And he was just like, "Yep, this is it. This is your problem. Well, this is one of the problems, and this is why. It has to do with your father, and this is why." And it was like all in the charts, and I was like, "Wow, now we know where to work." Like that's freaking
That is
phenomenal. Yeah.
cool. Oh, I love astrology. Astrology is something that I weave a little bit into my work as well with people. I do work with some couples, but I mostly do one-on-one work. And so I always ask for charts as well. There's
Nice.
so much information there. It's so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so helpful. So I guess I want to switch gears a little bit. So moving on from the sexual trauma, do you want to explain what sexual sovereignty is, this idea of sexual sovereignty? And then we can explore that a little more because again, there's so many threads we can pull just from there.
Yeah, sexual sovereignty is something that is so close to my heart. And basically, what sexual sovereignty means is like, what is your true sexuality if it was not colored or tainted by trauma, programming, and conditioning? And so, a lot of times, as it's basically like doing sexual shadow work, where you're really kind of just peeling back the layers of the false self in order to get to the true self. And so, just for example, with pornography, huge, huge problem nowadays, right? And so
Yeah.
I kind of touched upon it a little bit. It's basically forming and shaping your sexual preferences in a way that's not truly yours. And so that's not being sovereign with your sexuality, right? And so basically, we all have to do our own work around how do we peel back the layers of the false self? If you have sexual trauma, start there, right? If you're using pornography, start there. Really questioning our sexual preferences beyond just having like going out and just celebrating anything goes, which isn't really truly us. And I would argue, I always say that we're in the dark ages right now with sexuality and relationships. And so we're certainly not, practicing the higher expression of sexuality, which is what we're being called to, in addition to the higher expression of relationships. And so this is why sexual sovereignty, in my opinion, is very important. And the article on Substack takes you step by step through how you can start to do this work. So a lot of it people can do on their own. I have, journal prompts and things that people can do on their own to start to really deprogram from whatever we're being fed. I would also highly encourage people to not be watching so much television, movies, right? Watch the music that you listen to. Really like think about the lyrics and the things that are coming in. Anything that's coming into your field, the input, right? You have to question. I know that you two are into this kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
so many people don't. They're just a sponge and they're just absorbing all this stuff that is meant to be programmed in a way that's not taking us in the right direction, I would argue. So that's
Yeah.
the sexual
100%.
sovereignty. Like, who are you as a sovereign being?
Yeah, I remember going back to when I was growing up because I'm the youngest of four boys. I have three older brothers, and all of us had issues with pornography addiction. And it was like we didn't even have computers. Like I think we got our first computer when I was probably almost 10, like 12, after 12, and that's when the pornography stuff started. But it was like even just images in the magazines with underwear and stuff on TV, it's like stimulating this response. But I remember even when I was doing some of the somatics and some of the bodywork stuff that I did with Eurasimos, some of these ideas trailed back to as a kid watching the movie The Lion King. And it was the first time there was like sexual tension between these two kids, like the cubs, when they're rolling down the mountain together and she lands on top of him and they almost kiss or whatever. I remember that as a kid being the first time I was introduced to like what I would refer to as sexual tension now as a child. And it's like a little seed, and then Disney's, famous for putting in all kinds of weird subliminal stuff in the movies. But yeah, the programming's real.
Oh, it really is. I know. And I mean, I think like, and the addiction is so real too with it. And so, like, my argument too for the energy that I was speaking about behind all of this, right? That sort of hijacks your brain. It's more than just on a psychological level. I feel like it actually does sort of implant these addictions. That's what the energy is all about. It wants to just feed, it wants to continue to propagate this energy and spread it far and wide, in terms of the addictions. And so, yeah, it's a really big problem, but I'm
Yeah.
so happy to see that men are talking openly about this. And I'm not saying women don't watch pornography, but men are speaking openly now about porn addiction.
Yeah.
Things. So good.
Yeah, we're so susceptible to it. I mean, women are too, but men in particular.
I think it's different for men because
common.
men are more physical. Women tend to be more emotional. So porn is you're just watching the physical act. It's not, I think I'm sure there are sites like for women, and they usually kind of have a bit more of I'm sure they have like more of a storyline or whatever. Like I never got into porn that much, but like I think for men you can just go and watch anything and it's just like the physicality and it's very physical and it's like, and porn is made and it's made for men. It's really the majority of the porn industry is like they're making these films for men.
Right. And it's gotten so dark and just like really kind of disgusting, and so it's really troublesome, especially, as a mother. It's like there's just so much stuff out there. It's just wild. It's scary to think about, but all we can do is, if for parents out there, is just, talk to your children and really share with them, what sexuality. I mean, not that you obviously have to make it age appropriate, but the thing with pornography that really worries me is that it's purely physical, like you're saying. And so it's not, they're actors, right? They're people, it's all fake. There's no connection there of love, right? And so at a very basic level, sexuality that's in a container of love and care with somebody, automatically that is elevated way beyond the physical. When you have that connection with somebody, that's what it's meant to be shared in that kind of container. And so I do think that there is an attack on men and, taking advantage of the fact that men are so, driven by the physical, because I think for men, it's that integration of, the head and the heart. And so for men to be able to open their hearts in relationship and become more integrated in that way it's the path to enlightenment. If I could talk about that forever, but it's really robbing men of the opportunity for that.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. I mean, my mum, it just reminded me, my mum was a high school teacher. She actually worked, the last school she worked at was at a boys' school. And I can't remember what, they must have done some kind of like a training thing or maybe like a sexual health thing. I can't remember exactly, but she basically said like when she was there, like teenage boys did not know that women had pubic hair from watching porn.
Wow.
Because, and again, like it's so unnatural. Like everything about what they're showing in pornography is so unnatural. It's not the way it's meant to be at all. And I think it is very dangerous, because if that's what boys are exposed to in their adolescent years, when they're going through puberty and when they're just starting to, like, again, it just really sets the tone for what sexuality is for them moving forward. And the same thing happens for girls, but I mean, and then it's arguable too that, as men in their masculine energy being the leaders, are they also leading women into that, when they are getting into relationships and stuff? Like it can really go so deep, like if you look at it from that perspective as well. And yeah, it really sets the tone, I feel, for their sexuality, going into adulthood.
Yeah, and it really is sad too. I mean, it's sad on both sides how it's impacting men and how it's impacting women, because yeah, women do all sorts of crazy things, right, to make themselves more sexually appealing based on all of this information. And yeah, just like you said, it's not natural. on some level, they end up, abandoning themselves on a soul level a lot of times, not just sexually, but also in relationships. I think we've all been there, right? And so it's just really sad because nobody is experiencing authenticity. It's like, let's just be two real humans coming together and sharing love and intimacy, right? Together, and like how incredible that feeling is. I think more people are waking up to the potential now. Besides, it's like if you just stay on the physical level, like it's just, this is why it does lead to more and more addictions for people, because if you just stay on that level, you're going to get bored eventually. And then you're going to have to sort of do it in all these crazy ways and more extreme to get off. But if people just understand, like you have to think about connection on a physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual connection, right? That's where you expand, and that's where the connection and the intimacy really starts to get good. It does worry me a little bit with the anything goes culture, because people are really just celebrating all of these kinks and these fetishes and stuff, which really are, people don't want to admit this, but they're all rooted in trauma. And so then people just have to, that's all that they can get off on. And it's really like a prison.
Yeah. And one thing that I really appreciate, there's some other messages out there. I don't know if you're familiar with Kim Anami, and I like some of the hard hitting points that she makes, but the more subtle, just balanced, holistic things she talks about sexual sovereignty, change the tone for me when thinking about sexuality. And a big part of it was what's actually possible, what we were actually made for, and the ideas that are in the Tao and Tantra. Like, I think Tantra used to be something else back in my my younger years, being fixated on like sexual positions and stuff. But it's more about your potential, your knowing yourself, increasing your capacity to hold and to connect with energy, to feel it in the body and move it and use it for more than just, that quick finish at the end, and just being pigeonholed into this experience that isn't enlightening. It's not empowering. It's really not guys think they're just these freaking kings because they have all these relationships that only go this deep. When you find one person that's really, really tapped in and you can go deep together, it's like a whole different universe.
Yeah.
And you're kept from that if you just stay in that porn realm where everything is just that much.
Totally, it keeps it superficial. Yeah.
Yeah. And like one of the things that Isaac and I have talked about, like for when we have children, down the line, because obviously we're not going to be, talking to them about this stuff for a long time, but I think also just being able to have open conversations, like age appropriate, but open conversations about sexuality, because I think there's also so much repression that happens because we don't understand like the power of our sexual energy. And to look at it like just from a purely physical level, to look at like why we're meant to have sex, it's to procreate. So even there's always a higher purpose for sex, but then it's just been completely manipulated. And I think that because we're designed to, sex is for procreation, to create life, to create love and to create life and build families and all this stuff. And that is what connects us to God. It's very clear that through the conditioning, they're trying to take us away from, it's one of the ways they try to take us away from God. And I just think that there's also a lot of repression that happens because Isaac grew up more with the religious programming. For me, I wasn't really religious growing up, but I guess like we kind of joke that my mum's a bit of a prude. But look, since as in adulthood, she's told both me and my brother, she's like, you guys were conceived in love. Like I can tell you that, like you were conceived with so much love. And I was so happy when I had you, and like she didn't have postpartum depression or anything like that. And I think that that's so important. But I look back on, when I was younger, I think part of the reason I kind of went more towards promiscuity in my early adulthood was because I didn't really know how to express myself sexually in a healthy way. And there was only a very short period of time I feel that I had where I explored my own body. And like now I think when I have daughters, I actually want it when they're at the right age, I want them to encourage them to do that first. Explore your own body. Don't just turn to again, like going externally to seek that pleasure or that like that love or whatever it is. So I think that there needs to be like yeah, just more open conversation about that with our kids at the right age, but also like not to leave it too late where they're just repressing their sexuality.
Yeah, I know. As a parent, it's hard. Like you definitely don't want to sort of, I do see some parents kind of trying to, push their own things early on, and it's like too early. And it's like
Mm,
it's best to really wait for the child to show signs, right? And if you're
mm,
intuitively connected, you will know, right, with your children. But yeah, I totally agree. I feel like what you're saying, especially with girls, is so important because part of the pornography programming is like programming women to just be these sexual objects and to like fake it, and like that's how you
mm,
get love. And it's just it's really bad. So I love what you're saying about teaching your daughters about how to like what feels good to you in your body, right? And start
mm,
there and be able to um know what that feels like, what turns you on, what to ask for in relationships, and not to just do this thing, which is just, it's performative. It's really
mm.
about performing for the other person. And it's much less about you and like, does it feel good for you and what's going on with you? This is a lot for women, I'm sure, and men have their own stuff as well with it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, so we talked a bit about caring for the kids and setting up a situation where they're set up for success, they're going to flourish. But sometimes that doesn't go well. Sometimes you have, like if you have children and you get divorced and there's pain and damage and separation. I was wondering, what are I guess what are some signs that that damage is really affecting your kids, and what can you do about it? What can you do to help them learn to heal and help them to grieve and let go if that's part of it?
Yeah, such a good question because I think I'll just share like a little bit personally with how we navigated it because I think that we were really blessed to be able to um, after we decided to part ways. Well, first of all, we stayed together a lot longer than we probably were meant to, just because we were so worried that we were going to damage our child, right? And so that kept us together for a lot longer. We were very, very mindful of that. But when we really could say that we've given it our all and it's not going to work, when we parted ways, we actually continued to work with our therapist for some time after that to not only clear everything between he and I so that there wasn't any resentment and we can move forward in a healthy way with co-parenting, but we also worked with our therapist to help our son as well through it. And so I highly suggest getting support for that. It's really, really good. And so you can get support just with you and your ex-partner, right, to do that, to support the child. You can also get the child therapy as well. But I don't like to force therapy on the child unless they're actually like showing signs of it, because sometimes it's not always good to do that, to just like assume, right, that they're totally damaged and broken. Because actually, my ex and I thought like we were just like, oh my gosh, he's going to be so messed up. It's so much guilt internally. But the crazy thing in our case was that he actually benefited because when we were together, he could feel the tension, and we were never a couple that fought, and there was a lot of fighting or anything like high conflict, but there was a lot of tension and there just wasn't love present between us. And so he's very sensitive and he was picking up on all of that. And so used to just have major meltdowns and tantrums all the time. So his behavior was reacting to that. And so once we actually parted ways in a peaceful, loving way, and actually had two separate households, all of that stopped. All of the tantrums, all of the meltdowns stopped, and he actually was able to be more regulated. So I warn people, don't assume that it's going to be like that. And so there's also that saying, like, we have to stay together for the kids, right? We have to stay together for the kids. It's not always necessarily the best thing to do, right? It's a case by case basis.
Mm,
But yeah, I would recommend to just, if as a parent, if you can just be familiar with, um, just developmental, what does healthy development look like in my child? And if you're, like I said, the most important thing to just be connected, intuitively connected to your child. And if you see certain things that are abnormal or certain behaviors that are cropping up or changing, then intuitively you might want to reach out to a support person or a therapist.
Because little ones are so sensitive to, like, they feel more than they can often express sometimes. And yeah, you're right, like they pick up on that. I mean, I remember times growing up, I remember at one point in time, my parents, I didn't know what was going on. They just started seeing a counselor, marriage counselor, and I didn't know what was going on, but you felt something in the in at home, like that things weren't right, and my parents have they're still together. God bless them. I think they've been together almost 40 years now. So, and they've been through the trenches. And I think it's such a fine line between, like, do you kind of tough it out and like work through the challenges together, or are the challenges like more than that? Like, is it just like you're just not meant to be together? And I think, and you said like you probably stayed with your partner for much longer than you should have because you wanted to keep trying. And I think that's very common with the stigma around, divorce. Although I think also that's changing. I feel like that's turned into another like anything goes thing where, women are now having divorce parties and like celebrating, their divorces and stuff. And again, it's one of those things that it's marriage has become almost a little fickle. And yeah, and I think, but then there's in some cases, like in Isaac's case, and you can share as much as you want to, but in his case, he has a daughter. She's just turned 21, and in their case, like her mother left. So there are situations too where it's not really like the couple making a decision together. It's like one parent leaves, and then you've just kind of got to deal with that.
Yeah, and I talk about this stuff openly and share it for examples. And we have a funny situation between my daughter and I. So I was a single parent from the time she was just about to turn 2, and her mother wasn't in the picture. She opted out and became involved in drugs and the stripping scene and all that stuff. And so growing up, I early on had to I wasn't very nurturing, but I was trying to like figure out how to raise a daughter. And thank God I had my parents to help out when they would watch her when I would have to work and all of that. So she was very close to a stable family unit, and that was very helpful. The grandparents were, my parents were ready to pitch in, and then her grandfather on the other side of the family was also not close by, but still, would send her things and would visit every now and then and stay in her life and all that. But she grew up. We would have jokes like she called me Dad Mom or Uncle Dad or like all these funny things because I don't know how to converse with a child about it. Like, yeah, I was 16 when I got your mom pregnant, and then we had you when I was 17, and I graduated high school a year early with a baby, and those are these topics, but I'm like, these are hard topics. I'm not going to avoid it, but I can also joke a little bit and then hopefully be, have cultivated a relationship where when there is some sadness or there is a question that I'm open to receive that. But I feel like and I've asked her several times, we haven't done any therapy or counseling together around this, and I think that's probably something we should explore, but she was able to manage the loss. A little bit of humor helps, I guess, kind of like a pressure release for some of that. It kind of cuts the tension a little bit without being deflecting, without trying to repress anything. And yeah, we just, month by month, year by year, just go along and look for signs of imbalance. And she's very solid. She's a 3rd-degree black belt. She's starting her own little art business.
She's such a good kid, and that's what I
helping
think
with
you
my
can
other
see.
business. Yeah,
I think you can see, like you said, like your child, like you can see their behavior change. Like you know when something's wrong, and yeah, I think it made a big difference for her having that solid family unit. with Isaac's parents, and they're such beautiful people, and very Christian and very like just such beautiful, beautiful people. Like, she couldn't have been raised in a better home. And that's what I think is so important too, is like for people to have a support system. And unfortunately, that's not possible all the time. But even if it's like really good friends, and like, my mum's best friend, they've been best friends for like almost 50 years. She's like an auntie to me. Like, she's literally, and I know I can go to her anytime. So even if those relationships that your children have, that I think that's so beneficial when, a parent leaves or there is a break.
I totally agree. I totally agree with all of that. And thank you for sharing your story. Yeah, I'm very touched by that. And
Mm.
yeah, I'm celebrating you because that's not easy. And especially to make the decision to just go for it, even at a young age, is just really, really admirable. And so, yeah, I'm sure she's an incredible young woman. And, she'll know, and it's really like the hardest thing about parenting is we have to trust the
Mm.
path of our children. And especially like my son now is entering teenage years, and it's kind of like we have to like just trust everything up to this point. And not that I'm not going to mother him, but it's like I have to just respect his sovereignty, and he's going to go where he needs to go, and I have to trust that. It's the same with your daughter as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to touch back to one thing that you said, Alexa, which is that marriage, and just how it's become kind of this thing that people don't really take seriously. Like, I think for me, where I'm at right now is that I mean, marriage is such an incredible commitment, right? And I definitely don't take it lightly. And so best case scenario would have been for my son's dad and I to stay together, right? We did everything that we could. It didn't happen, but I do really think that people shouldn't take marriage lightly. And if you're wanting to have children with somebody, then, there is, in a perfect world, there would be a lot of preparation work, right? To both inner work psychologically and also physically and all of that.
Mm.
Because yeah, it is a sacred thing to bring a soul into a body. And so I always talk about like the middle way. And so I don't think people need to be necessarily going back in time to super traditional, like rigid roles, but I also am not a fan of the other end of the spectrum where it's just like loosey-goosey and whatever. So I think that marriage should be really respected, but it does take a lot of work, and a lot of commitment for sure.
Well, I know, like from my experience, when I was younger, I never wanted to get married, didn't want to have kids for a very long time. And I think that's because coming from parents who have been together like my whole life, I knew what a big commitment marriage was. And I think it scared me. Like, I think I was just kind of like, nah, don't want to deal with that. That's too much. And then I think as I went through, my three major relationships and the way that they were, that I was like, I'm not doing, like, I just thought that that's what my relationships were going to be like. And I didn't want to do that with someone forever. But now where I'm at, and again, this came from lots of, doing lots of inner work and getting to a point where, and I was carrying a lot of very negative beliefs around relationships, and I can see now why I was manifesting the relationships that I was, because I didn't believe that I would find someone that I could have a lasting relationship with, and then they never lasted. And now where I'm at, I'm like, and that's why I love this topic, because I think the more knowledge you have around this, and then like the more you start to experience the shifts, it's like Isaac said, it opens up this whole other world. And now when I think about having children, like what a beautiful way to bring a child into the world when you're practicing sexuality in such a conscious way, and using it as, like you said, like a bridge to God. And actually, if you could explain that a little bit more, because I love how I've heard you talk about this before, how sexuality can be used as this kind of like to deepen your connection to God. Like, how do you explain that?
I love this. It's hard to explain with words, right? Because
Yeah.
it's literally such like it's a felt sense when you're with your partner. But I mean, the best way I could describe it is really like, first of all, sexual energy, as we touched upon before, it is the energy of creation. It is holy energy. It's not to be taken lightly. And so when you have that reverence and that respect for sexuality, and you're sharing it with someone where you have that deep connection and that love, like I said, just that connection, having sharing sexual energy in that kind of container can actually bring you to have transcendent experiences where you feel like you do merge with the all, the one. But Tantra is a really good example too, because it is an example of, it's the masculine and the feminine coming together, right? On a physical level, emotional, mental, spiritual level. And so it really is, it's like the yin and the yang coming together. And so I'm really, I'm really into the concept of divine union, which is really it's union with God. And I really feel like you can do that through romantic relationship and certainly through sexuality. And so it's really just about, if you think about merging with the all or the one, it's everything. And so the masculine and feminine coming together is perfect complementary energies. You create that yin yang symbol. And then you can start to really have very incredible experiences. And certainly through orgasm, it is a connection. Like when you have that expanded state, I think it's way beyond just the feeling of physical pleasure. That's just me in my experience. And so when you share that with somebody, you can have pretty incredible experiences. So I don't know if you've experienced this before, but the potential is really pretty vast.
Oh, definitely. I mean, after our session together, and I'm happy to share, like, in my experience, because I think the first podcast I heard you on, which was on Here for the Truth, I think you spoke about this and how it can be like sex can actually be quite healing, and sometimes there's tears and sometimes there's emotions, and that really resonated with me because as we spoke about in our session together, like I have felt that. And again, I felt it with Isaac, like when I was in a loving, we have a very deep emotional connection, like in this beautiful relationship, that I would find sometimes that while we're being intimate, like tears would come, but like me always being in my mind, I'm like, why am I crying? Need to stop. What am I doing? Like, and I just shut it down and kind of stuff it down. And then I guess over time, like thinking about that now, like the couple of times that happened, I would then find myself pushing him away. I wouldn't want to be intimate. And I think because it felt so vulnerable that then I just kind of like shy away and be like, I don't really feel like it, or, and yeah, after my session with you and some of the like tips that you gave me, and I did the heart opening breath work, which was amazing. Yeah, we had such a beautiful experience. And then what came up for me when I just allowed the tears, what came up for me was that I realized that I had never really experienced this connection with someone, and it was so beautiful. And like to be able to receive, like it was hard for me to receive that love. I think that was like the core of it. And I realized, like I looked back and I just remember like my first few sexual experiences, and that including like when I lost my virginity, like I didn't have that beautiful connection where I was really loved and cared for, and like and I just allowed myself to cry, like because I just felt like that kind of set the tone for my sexuality for so long. And now to feel like that's shifting, like it was such a beautiful, such a profound experience. So yeah, like I can only speak for myself. Isaac does he's experienced some of that stuff with his own practices, like with some of the Taoist things and whatever. But like for me, I've definitely seen both sides of it now, and what's possible. Like, like we said, it opens up this whole other world, and it's like, whoa, if this is what I'm feeling like just at the start of it, like I can't even imagine the kind of like, experiences you can get to through this opening and yeah, like you said, like deepening this connection with the divine, because I think like the way that we were made, everything, we have the potential to connect to the divine and feel that power, like in everything that we do. And so sexuality is just one other aspect of that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, I was just so touched when I received your email about that, because I know personally, especially with someone who has a history of sexual abuse, yes, all the therapy and the breath work and the energetic clearing helps. But I mean, the addition of being with a partner who, like you said, just you can feel that love, that true love and that care, and to be able to let the tears come because they will. That's part of the healing, that trauma that you experience. It's like that it was such an integral part of my healing and continues to be, right? And so I think that it's just a perfect example of how healing in general, whether it's sexual healing or relational healing, we can't just do it somewhere in a cave, right? It actually requires that loving container with another person. That's where like the real healing happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I've noticed too from my experiences, I'm nothing negative against like the monks and the people that go off into the caves and follow that path. But being in a relationship with a woman as a man definitely shows you and gives you opportunities to do some serious healing work and grounding work and getting in touch with your shadow. Like that opened me up to that. I at one point in my life stopped having, stopped going on dates, stopped trying to go out and, find a partner. And I didn't know how long that would last. I just knew that I needed to work on myself, but I didn't really know how to do any work on myself. And I just ran away for 7 years. And then when I went back and tried to have another relationship and I did all the things that I thought were right, made sure it was somebody that was from a community of friends, of people that knew each other, and we, they all thought very highly of the person, and it was a good choice, but it was a good choice for me to get in touch with my shadow. And once I'm in that relationship, and now there's somebody to agree or disagree with, and there's somebody else's energies and somebody else's, they're just holding up that big mirror to you and being like, this is you. This is who you have attracted. That's when the real healing took place, at least when I realized I had problems and I had to go find out what the solutions were.
I love that so much because this is why I talk about how relationships are probably the most powerful vehicle for evolution and growth, right? On an individual level, but also collectively with humanity, 100%. And so that's why I'm so devoted to this work, because it's like, if more people can realize what you just said, it's like a relationship is not meant to drive you crazy. I mean, there are some instances where, you're not meant to be with that person. But if you can actually, when the mirror is held up for you, it takes humility and it takes humbleness to be like, oh my God, these are all of my blind spots. And it's not easy at first, especially when when it's like first getting stirred up. But I mean, at this point in my life, I like literally beg for my blind spots to be shown to me, whether that's partner, my child, my support people. I'm like, please show me, because like I want to do this work. I want to become the best version of myself. And that's how we do it, by facing the stuff internally in our shadow. And so this work is pretty profound. I'm so happy people are talking about conscious relationships and how you can actually work with all this stuff, and how when two people come together and your stuff gets stirred up, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I hope that when people talk about triggers and all that stuff, I hope people are understanding it's not really what someone's doing to you. It's actually just an indication that there's something internally that needs to be healed. Just that mindset shift alone is huge for people.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think that was like the biggest thing for us when we started our relationship, was we were both on our own journey of doing this inner work and shadow work and like healing stuff. And when we started our relationship, from the outset, we knew that like I was very committed. I think you were very committed. And we went into our relationship knowing that we're both so committed to our individual healing and our journeys, and we're coming together, and we'll be able to do that together as well. But we are still individuals at the end of the day. And I think, and again, we both came from really codependent relationship patterns where we were so tied to the other person that it was, like really negatively affecting us. And I think it makes such a big difference to, again, set the tone for a relationship where you go into it knowing that, this is a lifelong journey. Like, that's what I always say. There is no destination when it comes to like the inner healing. You don't like do the thing and you're like, I'm healed now. I'm totally enlightened and I'm never going to have to do it again. It's like a lifelong journey. So I think I think it needs to be made clear, because I think sometimes people do fall into that trap with like, I've met the perfect person and we're going to live happily ever after, and we're both so quote unquote awake, and then it's like you're always going to trigger things in each other. Like that's literally a relationship. Like that meme, there's this meme that went around that's like that they're walking down the aisle after they've gotten married, and the caption is, "Yay, we're going to be triggering each other's childhood traumas for the rest of our lives."
That's exactly what it is. I mean, and if people get together and they truly like, how there are some relationships, whether those are friendships or romantic relationships, where it is actually pretty chill, right? Like there's not a lot of stuff coming up. That's fine. I kind of, there's a difference between like evolutionary relationships, which are meant to like, there's like friction, there's stuff that comes up, there's like triggers, right? And it's on a spectrum. It could be either like there's way too much triggering. You don't want to live in a relationship where it's like everything's getting activated all the time. That's too much. But you also don't want to be on the other end of the spectrum where it's just so like everything's just totally easy. Because I mean, some people, I guess, would, but there's just not a lot of growth happening there. And so for me, like I want that sweet spot of like, it's a combination of, yeah, we're comfortable with each other, but then there's a little bit of stuff getting stirred up for us to work with. I always like that healthy middle way.
Yeah. And how does that correlate to the topic of polarity? Because I know that's kind of a trendy thing. There's people talking about polarity work and polarity this and that. Yeah, talk more about that if you have something to offer.
I have so much to say about masculine and feminine polarity. I don't even know where to begin, but actually just to tie into what you're just saying. So yes, polarity, masculine, feminine, or just polarity in general does provide that friction. When it like opposites attract, those people will be attracted. But then if they truly are opposites, like through and through, then it will be highly like a lot of friction and a lot of just like, and so I like a balance of polarity and resonance. That's kind of what I was just describing. I like there's enough differences in the other person such that they are kind of the polar opposite of you. That provides really good sexual chemistry, obviously, right? The masculine polarity is necessary to create that sexual spark. But then there's also enough resonance where there's a level of comfort, right? Because sometimes in extreme examples, it's like there's so much that it's almost like you can't ever relax with that person or just like hang out. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's like a balance of sort of sameness and difference. That's probably the best way I can describe it. And then also like with all the masculine feminine polarity stuff, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen some of the stuff I've shared, but I used to be involved in the Los Angeles scene back in like 2015 to like 2019. There was like John Wineland, there was Justin Patrick Pierce, and some of the scene here, right? And so I definitely went down the road of like, yeah, doing all the beginner polarity mistakes. I was like, women just have to be soft and sweet, and we just have to be passive, and like we just have to worship the man. And like, will that work? Oh yeah, it definitely works. But then you attracted men who like need to be worshiped and who are narcissistic and like in their egos, right? I think what you're saying about like being open to having your woman be a mirror for you, like you're not in your ego when you're saying that. That's like humility, right? That's like opposite of ego, where you're like, hey, show me, right? Show me where I can grow and evolve. And you can do that too for your woman. It's not just the woman doing that to the man. But what I see in the polarity spaces, and maybe things are changing, but I kind of am like keeping my finger on the pulse of what's going on. I do think a lot of it is just stroking the man's ego, but that's not the true masculine. That's not the true masculine. The true masculine is beyond ego. It's a pure version. And when I think about ego, either in men or women, these are things that we don't necessarily want to kill the ego, but we don't want to be there 24/7, if that makes sense. So yeah, lots to say about masculine feminine polarity. You can ask me anything if you want to about it.
Well, we love this topic because, again, we've both had our personal experiences, and we're both very much advocates for integrating the masculine and the feminine within you, because we all have both. And I totally get what you're saying. I think like Byron Bay, we live near there, like that's kind of known for that kind of crowd as well sometimes. And all the women speak like this and they're really soft and like up in the clouds and like they're super spiritual, like, and they're just, yeah, they're not grounded. And like, I see that and I'm just like, they haven't integrated their inner masculine, you know, because we all have both parts and they always play a role in different, like there's always different dynamics. Like, and for me, so in my experience, I realized, probably it was around the time that we were getting to know each other. And, you know, because we obviously did the whole thing long distance for the first 4 or 5 months before we even met in person. And we fell in love during that time. But honestly, it was such a great way to start a relationship because there was no physicality. So again, we just had to get to know each other on a really deep level. And one of the things that was part of us getting to know each other was around that time I had realized that I had been in my masculine energy for so much of my adult life. And I realized that it was because, I mean, obviously it's multifactorial. But the main things were my relationship with my father. I guess I'd never really felt, that masculine energy from him. So I had to be that for myself. I had to protect myself and he always provided, but I didn't feel like the love and protection, that kind of masculine energy. So I had to be that for myself. And then through, you know, my relationships and every time a relationship ended and it didn't work out, it just kind of drove me more into my masculine because I couldn't get that from someone else. And then, yeah, I realized that I was like really in my masculine energy and, I mean, unlike you, I didn't kind of do the pendulum swing. I just didn't know what to do. I was like, how do I get out of my masculine? What's feminine? What do I was like so lost. And I just kind of over time, I just, I was able to come more into that feminine energy. I think a big part of it was because Isaac did provide that really beautiful masculine energy for me to feel safe enough to let go and just let that feminine energy come through and like be okay with trusting him to provide and protect for me and me not having to do that for myself on so many levels. Because I think when people hear provide and protect, they just think on a physical level, but like emotionally and in a lot of other ways. And yeah, I feel like you see this a lot. I mean, and you look at Andrew Tate, like when Andrew Tate came out and, you know, he's like preaching what it is to be masculine. And again, because men have come out of their masculine, like this divine masculine energy, they don't even know what that is. Someone like Andrew Tate pops up and he's like, well, I'm going to teach you how to be a man. And there's just like a lot of what he talks about. And like, it's not all wrong. I think it's in the delivery, and then like who he is as a person doesn't represent the divine masculine at all. And I think people get really lost in that and they tend to do this pendulum swing from one to the other and there's no integration whatsoever.
Yeah, so good. The integration is so key, right? Like, so I am slightly obsessed with Carl Jung. His path of individuation basically takes you from the discovery of the persona, oh my God, like this isn't really who I am, to then moving on through deep shadow work for, you know, some years. And then he has right before you hit divine union or the true self, right, is the period of anima animus integration, which is basically what you're saying. Anima for men is the inner feminine, animus for women is the inner masculine, and it's the integration of that, right? It's that yin and the yang, that inner union coming together. But the beauty of relationship is, like you just said, with him being in his healthy masculine allows you to be able to go deeper into your feminine and healing layers of that, right? And so that's why relationship on so many levels is so important. We touched on this before, but for our healing, relationships are just incredible, right? Rather than I don't actually know if you can do some of that deep work on your own, right? Especially with the masculine and the feminine energies, because yeah, I need a masculine partner for me to be able to relax into my feminine. Can I do that solo, single? I mean, maybe, but it's harder. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, I experienced that. And I think that's why too, I think my relationships, I mean, my longest relationship was 2.5 years. The one before that was 1 year. The one after that was, I mean, really only 6 months, but we lived together for longer than that. And because I was mostly single for most of my adult life, you're right. Like it is very hard because I felt like, especially on a physical level at that time, I had to provide and protect myself because I lived alone through a lot of that time. And again, when I was living, it's interesting because even during the years, some of those some of that time when I was living at home with my parents, again, not feeling that from my dad. I think I kind of, even in adulthood, I kind of just stayed in my masculine, in that masculine energy. And now I actually love, like now I actually appreciate those masculine qualities that I have. Like, you know, I always say the example I give is like when I'm working, like I'm super organized and super structured, and it's like very, very much like I love that. I need that, you know, and I love that I can draw on that energy when I need to work and get things done. But when I'm at home and I switch off, like, you know, when I'm in the kitchen cooking, that's when I feel like I'm just like, I'm in my flow. I'm just like, got my music playing, and I'm just like, and I can just let go. And it's like having that balance of both.
Right. Yeah. And what you're talking about is energetic agility. It's moving between the yin and the yang, right? And this is how you become a whole integrated person. And so, yeah, on Carl Jung's path of individuation, this is sort of the final stages before you hit that true self, aka enlightenment, divine union, all this stuff. And so it's happening for a reason. I think that even though there's so much that I have to say about maybe what's not working, right? Like the positive side is if I can zoom out collectively and look at, you know, what men have been through, what women have been through, I feel like we're actually going through this collectively, right? I mean, men had a chance to get in touch with their hearts, their emotions, and now they're coming back to like, what is healthy masculine? And women the same, right? Women had a chance to go through building some of those masculine skills. So I don't think it's all bad. And I don't advocate for going back to traditional roles because I feel like that is actually going in the other direction. People can obviously do whatever they want. However, when you start to go that route, what happened in my own life, and I see this happening especially with women, but also men too, is that you're abandoning parts of your soul. Like that you, on a soul level, that's actually, those are qualities and essences that you have actually like earned perhaps over lifetimes. And so if you're trying to cut that stuff out and abandon it so you can be 100% your feminine or masculine, like you're just cutting, it's like you're cutting off an arm or something. You know, you have to go back and retrieve it. And this goes for men and women too. But I mean, in my own personal life, I had to make all the mistakes and do all the things and then come and find my way. So, I mean, I'm hoping for both men and women that we will.
Yeah. I have a question about the process, and maybe you have some insights into for the feminine or the masculine. So I grew up in like country, Wyoming, masculine, like, you know, on riding horses, but for someone who doesn't know how to access, let's say a man, how to access the feminine without getting too overly identified with it and becoming soft and effeminate, because that's another problem I see now is men are becoming more effeminized, whether by choice or by society conditioning.
Right.
How do you integrate without over-identifying with it, and maybe the same for women, for not becoming too masculine, but integrating it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that question because I do think that there's a way to do it. And so, and it's almost like as I speak, I'm like, okay, it's hard for me to sort of give advice because I do think there's part of it like with stumbling and falling, right? And like finding your way through it. So it's hard to sort of give like this is how you should do it. However, like I think for men, all it really means is like, are you in touch with your heart? Like that, like it doesn't have to be more than that, right? It's the balance of the head and the heart. It really doesn't have to be more than that. And so I think that with men, you just have to worry. So Carl Jung calls it anima possession for men, where you're really too overly involved, overly emotional, drama all the time. It's like you're kind of like you're stewing in your emotions, right? And it's just too overly emotional. So he calls that anima possession because it's basically you've gone too far. The other end of the spectrum is honestly where you don't have any connection to your heart, right? And so again, find that middle, that healthy middle, where it's like you're getting in touch with how you're feeling, right? Tune into your heart. How are you feeling emotionally, right? Just ask yourself these questions and do the work around just building that emotional intelligence. I feel like for men, it doesn't really have to be more complicated than that.
Yeah, we don't want to complicate it too much for them, or then they just won't do it.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing. I was actually just talking to a friend of mine. We were having this discussion, especially about Carl Jung. He was very into that. I've recently just glazed over some of the stuff that he's written about it, the anima and the animus, and I was like, this actually describes what I've been trying to say about my experience. And the first thing I told him was just stop repressing, or at least try to be aware, try to sit with it, and don't repress it. And here's some reasons why. It's something that is really near and dear to my heart, of like not becoming like the anima possession. I find that heartbreaking and sad for some men, because you're losing. It's almost like you're abandoning your masculine. And my inner child just like weeps for that, because it's just like I abandoned my feminine, and that little part inside of me was like hurting for years and like caused all kinds of, upset in my life, because I just kept kicking it down. And it's like just that repression can turn into this warped sense of self. And to me, that's just like probably the first thing is like, well, take your boot off the neck and get some air to that.
Right. That's why I love breath work too. Going back to it, it's such a great way for men to actually start to open the heart, right? And to see what's in there. If it's like, okay, just tell like a man, like to just get in touch with your heart. Like a lot of men will be like, well, how do I do that? That's why I love breath work, because it really does. It gets you into your heart. It also, the other side of the feminine as well, beyond just emotions and heart, is the intuition and learning how to actually open that channel and trust, right? Beyond just being in the rational, logical mind all the time, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to balance it with the intuitive nature. And so that's another reason why I love breath work too, especially for men, because
Yeah,
it opens that intuition as well.
I love that.
So good. Well, we will probably have to land the plane here, because I'm very aware of your time and we're on completely different time zones. So it's probably getting into the evening for you. So just to finish up, I mean, how can people find you? What's the work that I know that you've got your podcast and some other things that you do. So how can people get into what you're doing and what you have to offer?
Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, we can all talk for so long. So I really, really appreciate you for just asking great questions. And I love talking about all this stuff. So, so people can find me. I'll obviously give you all the links, right? My website is love-evolved.us. I'm also on Instagram, Love Evolved. People can message me there. They can email me. People can set up a free 30-minute call where we actually go really, really deep. I mean, you did one, so and so I'm happy to, go really deep with you over 30 minutes. And then I usually send people an email full of resources after. So you can book that through the links on my website or even Instagram. And then, I work with people over Zoom all over the world. I'm a psychologist, relationship coach, and breathwork teacher. So I kind of blend all of those together. I have regular sessions where we just talk. I have breathwork only sessions. And then I have longer sessions where we do breathwork and therapy together. And I also have a mentorship where I take people through like a 3-month process, which is really kind of the best of the best in my work. Starting with foundational levels of building secure attachment, healing from codependency, moving up to conscious relationships, and then divine union. And so that's sort of the pinnacle of my work. People who are drawn to that should just reach out. You can also find all the information on my website. But it was so good to be here with both of you. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Amazing. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for coming on.
Our pleasure. And it's amazing how these topics tend to flow in the ether, and it's definitely such a good time to bring you on, because I think this is on a lot of people's minds, and they're going to get a lot of value out of this. And I encourage everyone to go check out Leigh-Anne LoPinto at her website, find her work, anywhere else she's done podcasts. You've just been a wellspring of information. And thank you so much for showing up and showing us your authentic self.
Yeah, I've got to say, Leigh-Anne, that's one of the things I love about you too so much, is that I remember on the podcast I heard you and you're like, just book in a free 30-minut call. Like there's no obligation to like continue working with me after that. And then when I looked at your website, you actually said, and I often, not that I look for this, but it's definitely like, I'm just like, yeah, this person's authentic, because you even say on your website, like how some therapists, and I've come across this, where they kind of tell you that you need to keep doing the work and keep you coming back because they just want you to keep, paying them basically. But I think it's also like a bit of an energy trap where you're outsourcing when you feel like you need to see someone to heal from something, or and continue that work, like almost like forever. It's not really authentic, and you are kind of outsourcing that work to someone else. So I love that about you. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And we'll pop all of your links in the show notes for people to get in touch with you.
Thank you. Okay, let me just say one quick thing. I feel very passionately about what you just said because I was on the receiving end of just so many therapists, helpers, coaches who were always just like, there would never be a conversation, right? It's like, oh, just see you next week, right? And then you get like pulled into this trap. And so I'm very anti that. I mean, I tell people, even regular clients, I'm like, you decide, you have autonomy. I can make recommendations for how often we should see each other, but I definitely am like someone who's very pulled back with that. And, like I don't pressure people at all. So I highly encourage people who maybe got that value out of our talk to just book in with me. And yeah, I love to talk about this, obviously. And I love meeting people from all over the world. So thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Whew, that was a heart-opening and very vulnerable episode for both of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really wanted to be quite open because, like we spoke about in the episode, this isn't talked about a lot. There's still quite a lot of taboo about these subjects. However, in the more mainstream society, like Leigh-Anne mentioned, it's become more of an anything goes and you can be whatever you want and do. So there isn't really this middle ground. It's like I find that it's either quite taboo, no one talks about it. And to be honest, a lot of people aren't really talking about it much in this way. And then or you've got the other end of the spectrum where it's like anything goes, polyamory, like all these things. Yeah. And people aren't really living in their authentic truth and, how we're designed to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many topics, ranging from children in a relationship breakup that we've experienced. And honestly, like I'm still working through, still learning how to navigate some of these waters. And I'm just really glad that we are talking about this. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts that talk this way about these topics. And I feel like the people that have come into our lives that have offered their assistance and guidance and stuff are the right people at the right time that come in to offer their assistance and their wisdom. And yeah, I think this is a special episode. And you're very welcome for us putting together this interview about these topics. But in all seriousness, I can't think of too many topics that are as important as this. And I feel like we did a really good job of sharing our personal experiences and opening this up to a lot of different conversations about some very, very vital things that people need to talk about in their relationships and in society in general.
Yeah. And just being really real with yourself. Like that's what I would recommend to people, that if you want to kind of explore this realm a little more and open up yourself more to what is possible through conscious relationships and this idea of sexual sovereignty. Because like Leigh-Anne says, and I love that she really spruiks this message because I think it's what we really need to come back to, is that sexual energy is holy energy. It is another connection to God for us. And it's been so warped and we've been very conditioned to view sexuality in a completely different way. And I think that, it's really important to be really real with yourself about like what are your blocks around sexuality or what's your conditioning and whether there's sexual trauma or anything like that involved. There they go. We'll let the kookaburras have the floor. I don't know how.
I think they just think that this is an important topic as well. And they're like,
they must.
Yeah, get your freak on.
They must, or they're just laughing at us because they're like, we've known this stuff for thousands of years. You don't know about sexuality.
Well, I think it's such a tragedy too that in so many relationships that where the sexuality dries up, so to speak, and like, it's just too bad. It doesn't have to be that way, and I think it can always come back. It just needs conscious love and attention, and sex has been both perverted and elevated to, to what it really isn't designed to be, which is just like, grotesque in some, media and all that.
and just
it's also
purely
been
physical
suppressed.
and just purely physical. Like it's so much more than that. It can be a spiritual experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like these two opposite ends of this spectrum where it's either over glorified or made to be just physical, or it's completely repressed, not talked about, like in my family, not really talked about ever, or laden with shame and all this stuff. And so,
but even in my family, like my family's, you probably wouldn't call them conservative.
right.
However, like my mum had one conversation with me, in my later teen years or maybe my mid-teens, just about, just like, when you lose your virginity, you should be with someone that you love and whatever. And that was really all I was told. And, for someone like me who at a young age, I wasn't really interested in relationships, just because like I dated, in my later teen years, and it was all very nice. And compared to most people my age, I lost my virginity it was like right before I turned 18, and like I was going to high school with girls that were losing their virginity at 13 and 14. So I'm actually pretty proud of myself for that. But for someone that wasn't really interested in a long-term committed relationship at that age, because I knew that it was such a big thing and I just wasn't really interested, like the conversation my mom had with me, it kind of fell on deaf ears, because then when I started to go out and meet boys, after I'd left school and I wanted to explore sexuality, I just thought that's how you did it. Like you do it with boys. But we touched on that during the conversation, that you really should start by exploring your sexuality with yourself first and foremost, and figuring out what you like and what you don't like, and just to be in your body and fully feel that sexual experience, because I think it's so common, and definitely in my experience, it's so common that we just kind of dissociate a little bit, or again, we're just so focused on the physical, or I often get quite up in my mind and I'm just not really in my body, like during sex and intimacy. So yeah, it's another whole world to explore. And I do think it is a really important topic, because again, it's just one aspect of our spirituality, and there are so many different aspects. And I think the more that we can understand them and integrate them, the more cohesive and whole we can become and move forward, and then pass that on to our children, and, bring our children into the world that way, which is, also I think why this is such a beautiful topic for anyone wanting to bring children into the world. We definitely are at that point in our lives. And I think if you can bring that conscious awareness into your sexual relationship and your intimacy with your partner, what a beautiful way to bring a child into the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And we didn't talk about this in the episode, but I just had this flash of inspiration. I was like, I think part of it has been part of this suppression, or this basing sexuality in something that's just purely physical. I remember reading Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, where he talks about, so in the Stoic philosophy, a lot of people, especially now, a lot of men are embracing some of the old thoughts of the Stoics, which I think are very, very valuable, very helpful. But they're also very limited because it's all very physical. The Stoic philosophy is kind of detached from anything spiritual. It's all physical. And Marcus Aurelius, he said, to basically keep yourself humble and remember that sex is basically just skin and mucus. It's like all he said. And I get what he's saying, but that's kind of a tragedy as well, because it's way more than that. Holy smokes, it's way more than that. It's not, back in his day, it was probably like that, or it was just orgies. Like that was kind of the extremes that people, and it's kind of like that again now, where it's very Puritan in some of these, especially around religion, where it's just like, well, you wear the long sleeve pajamas and the long sleeve pants, and you just poke your willy out through the hole, and then you do it, and then you go back and you don't talk about it ever again. I'm just like, geez,
lots of shame. But also, I think in the New Age spiritual, in New Age spirituality too, it's also been distorted, where it's like, we're having this spiritual sexual experience, but they're like same thing. They're having orgies, and it's like all about polyamory and all this stuff. And to be completely honest, when I say considered polyamory, I was never going to follow through on it. But I remember, and again, I was conditioned. Like I remember seeing things on TV in the way that they, like I watched a Louis Theroux documentary once on polyamory, and the way they present it is kind of like, well, this just works for us. And they, he talks to certain thruples and things. But I remember even watching that, you could tell in some situations, you could tell there's almost at least one person that you can tell is like compromising their morals and like who they are to be in that situation, because the person that they're with that they love so much is the one that wants that. And I could see that. But I remember like opening myself up to that, because I was like, at the time, I think I was like on a break with my partner at the time. And I remember thinking, yeah, see, I could definitely, like, if I had another partner, because then I could get, the things that I don't get from, my current partner, I can get from like someone else. And it just doesn't work like that. It's just, we can't have everything we want. And I think that when we're with our partners, the things that we may not like or that we find challenging or whatever, they're always opportunities for growth, both in ourselves and in the relationship. So you can't just bypass all that by being like, oh, I'll just find another boyfriend or another girlfriend and just like get the things that, the needs that aren't being met in my primary relationship. I'm going to go elsewhere. I just don't think it works like that.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think every man has thought, it'd be nice to have another wife.
Would it really, though?
Have two. If I could just clone you, just have two.
Oh, cloning's different, but would it really?
I did fantasize that about like a couple of years ago, where I'm like, it might be easy to like, you could swap and like have childcare and, like two people taking care of the kids would be great. And then or three people sharing the household duties. But that's never really what it comes down to. It's typically people that go for that are, it's really just about.
Well, and a lot of the times it's
having multiple partners.
A lot of the times, I mean, not that I know a lot, but I remember watching this documentary and kind of looking at some things around polyamory, and I think a lot of the times it does come down to sexual needs and preferences, and again, that's if it's coming down to those primal needs only. I just think that that's not where you should be operating from.
Well, it's another form of, in my opinion, trying to fill that hole, and you're justifying it in a way where it's...
No pun intended, guys.
Didn't even think about that. Yeah, you're literally trying to fill that hole, but it's not a physical hole. There's a spiritual component, and it starts with the individual. It starts with you. And when you work on yourself, and that's one of the things I love about our relationship, even before we met physically in person, was we both had this commitment, and we talked about it openly, that our priority when it comes to like when we have emotional issues or whatever, it's our internal work is usually the first place that we go to.
Absolutely. I think that should always come first. And I think we spoke about that, is that you have to commit to doing that work in yourself first and foremost, especially in relationship, because I think what a lot of people do is they get into a relationship and they're always trying to fix and change the other person, and it never works. I think I've definitely been there in my past relationships. You're looking for the right person.
Yeah. Like my misconception was like, oh, I'm always looking for the right person. You're never going to find the right person until you become the right person for yourself.
Yeah.
And then when you have found yourself, and you don't have to have all the answers. It's not about that. You're not trying to be an enlightened being before you find someone else that matches. But really start with that internal relationship. And then from there, go outward. And you'll find, all kinds of beautiful dynamics with living your life peacefully, not needing someone else to come in and fill this for you. And if this person isn't doing it for you, then I need another one. And then I'm pretty, if you follow that road, you're just going down the dating road, in my opinion.
Yeah, well,
like
and
at different levels. At some point, you're just going to be,
and I think that's what's going on in society and in the mainstream. It's sexuality's been geared in a way that does take people to the lower realms, as Leigh-Anne says,
the realms, the dirty realms.
Yeah, whereas. sexual sovereignty, as she says, sexual sovereignty is all about actually raising your vibration and actually connecting to God through your sexual energy, because it is a creative energy. That's at its core. That's what it is. It's a creative energy. We create life.
It's your life force energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, look, as you can tell, guys, we could talk about this topic for hours. It's definitely near and dear to our heart, as it is to Leigh-Anne's, and that's why we're 100% going to have her on again. Hopefully in the near future. And definitely check her out. We'll have her links in the show notes. So she's got a website and she's on socials, and she's always posting about this stuff too. She always does little stories, and she's always talking about this, and love everything she does. She's also got a Substack too, which I've only read one article on there, but they're really like meaty. Like there's so much that she talks about in them, but she's got Substack articles, and she's also got her own podcast. So if you want to hear more about what she does and more of these conversations, she's got her own podcast and she does interviews with other people as well. So definitely check her out, get into it, and stay tuned for when we have her on again.
Yeah. And don't forget to like and share this episode with other folks that you think might be interested in it. And if you feel so inclined, we'd appreciate it if you support our show. And you can do that by just doing that, liking, sharing, commenting. And also, if you have an injury or you suffer from muscle pain, knee pain, that kind of stuff, we have remedies for that. And naturalartform.com is a business that we run. And if you heard our intro, it's got a lot of good ingredients, and it's handmade, and we use it all the time.
Mm-hmm. So it's literally a first aid remedy for us. We use it for everything.
Yeah. And I'm going to go bathe myself in it this evening after my show.
Thanks so much, guys. We look forward to seeing you again on the next one.
Yes. Bye.